Silent Hill is a game that values quiet. It understands just how frightening absence can be. Silence invites questions. Was that something crawling towards us we just heard? Or was it the empty echo of the hallway inventing noises in our mind? The longer it lasts, the longer the silence stretches, the more stress we feel as we wonder what is waiting to eventually break that silence. The visual world is quiet too. So much is covered in seemingly endless rolling fog, a world that is deceptively peaceful, visually monotone. In an instant, that seeming peace can shatter into something violently upsetting. Silent Hill is a story of abuse, of the suffering of one innocent little girl. But we don't meet this girl for most of the game. She doesn't speak more than a few words, and not directly to the player. What we learn of the truth, we learn in silence. What's important is not what is seen or heard, but the absence, what is missing. Puzzles throughout the game reference famous children's stories, The Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland. Each involves objects named for the cast of those books, but both of them are missing the most integral part, the little girls. Neither Alice nor Dorothy appear in Silent Hill. This is a town where children disappear. Alessa Gillespie's pain has gone unnoticed for so long. Now that the town is quiet, now that the fog has blocked off what's unnecessary, what's left are what really matters, the pieces of the puzzle that will reveal the truth. After so long, Alessa's story will finally be heard. The story of Silent Hill begins with a single ominous quote. The fear of blood tends to create fear for the flesh. It's never used in the events of the game itself. It never appears outside the short, eerie intro trailer that plays before the game begins. But it sets the stage and the tone of the game with its vague, horrific wording. What could it be intended to mean? In the files of an earlier build of the game, you can find notes in Japanese written by the game's developers. One includes a quote similar to this one, likely intended as an opening line before it was replaced. The quote, however, was not an original. It was a line from Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, specifically the first section of story, The Knight's Tale. Just as there never died man, quoth he, that had not life on earth in his degree, just so there never lived a man, he said, in all this world that will not come to death. This world is but a thoroughfare of woe, and we are pilgrims passing to and fro. Death is an end of every worldly sore. And after this he said a great deal more, to this effect full wisely to exhort the people that they might find comfort. Death is the end of every worldly sore. That was the line that appeared in the files of Silent Hill's prototype. The final version uses the fear of blood instead. But can the intent of one give us some insight into the intent behind the other? The story of the night is a tale of romance and rivalry, as two friends turn into enemies in their attempts to woo the same noble woman. A contest is set to decide the victor, and before it begins, each of our three main characters makes a prayer to the gods. One prays for victory, one prays to marry his love, and the woman prays for her husband to be a man that loves her. The one who prayed for victory ends up winning the competition, but before he can gain his prize, he succumbs to his wounds and dies. Thus, the second man who prayed for marriage becomes the husband. The section of the poem that includes this quote comes from a portion after the competition when one of the lovers has died and the tale has taken on a tragic feeling. All is well in the end as love has won out, but a life has been ended. The language meant to comfort the audience and the reader emphasizes that this is the fate of all beings, the great equalizer, and more than that, death is a gift that ends pain. It is the end of every worldly sore, referring in this case to physical wounds. The idea that death is freedom from pain certainly isn't out of place in Silent Hill, but it doesn't quite fit the narrative either. How many of our characters actually die and escape pain? Alessa should be long dead, but has been forced to drag on. Even in death, she is reborn as an infant, who will later face Silent Hill again. Lisa's very existence seems to negate death. She should likely be long gone, but isn't. And even after her revelation as to her nature, she appears again to drag Kaufman into hell. Death is not the end of pain in Silent Hill. So instead, our descriptor is fear of blood tends to create fear for the flesh. Fear is certainly at the heart of this story. So many people are afraid and suffering. Fear comes from our instinctive flinching away from danger, from pain, and blood is what is shed when injured. The sight of blood indicates harm. It's not meant to be seen outside our skin. And our flesh is what contains our blood. To keep from shedding it, we need to keep our flesh safe. So should we begin to fear being hurt, we should fear the sight of blood. And being afraid of blood, we begin to fear our very flesh. Flesh can be harmed, it can be damaged. Best to avoid anything that can cause it pain. The more someone succumbs to fear, the greater their fear of the physical world, and the vessel they preside in inside it. Fear of blood tends to create fear for the flesh, and the quote is shown over that solemn picture of Alessa, found next to her hospital bed, where she suffered in her flesh for 7 years. Alessa must be terrified of her flesh, that aches and oozes with burns and blood. The game opens just after Harry's car has crashed. For the player, it comes after a surreal opening scene, full of heavy foreshadowing and hints to what's to come, some of which won't come true. Many of these scenes don't appear in-game. The player sees him waking up, stepping out into the fog. We don't see the crash itself, the beginning of which is shown in the intro. It gives the game an interesting mood. We know something horrible has happened, but now the world is still and silent again. It's the ringing quiet after hitting your head, the calm before the storm. This is the first time we really see our protagonist. We know little about him besides the fact he's a father. His colors are muted blues and browns. He doesn't stand out in a crowd. His name, Harry Mason, sounds like something out of a detective novel. Harry comes to Silent Hill with his daughter for a vacation that goes horrifically wrong. Later events will reveal that Cheryl is his adopted child, found by the side of the road, created by magic. She's a figure out of myth, a holy child born of no sexual congress, and one who will tragically cease to be before her 7th year ends. The central characters of the game are 2 pairs of parent and child, Harry and Cheryl, Alessa and Dahlia. The 2 girls are nearly invisible. They have few lines of dialogue, a couple of cutscenes, but most of their role in the game involves vanishing into the distance. It is the parents who play the active role, who have all the control in the situation. Harry is a good man acting to save his child, but Dahlia is not, and the story will show the 2 extremes of parenthood, vicious self-interest and abuse between a mother and her blood-born daughter, and self-sacrificing noble love between a father and his adopted daughter. In the moments after the crash, Harry realizes Cheryl's gone missing. Immediately, the stakes are raised. The worst has happened, and we haven't even seen our first monster. But it isn't long before the nightmare begins. The normal city streets become a bloody red hell, and monstrous children attack. A terrible play on our own missing child. Instead of finding Cheryl, we find heinous little demons. Unable to escape, Harry seems to succumb to their attacks, only to wake up and suddenly find he's somewhere else. Dreams in Silent Hill are used to confuse and create uncertainty. You can never be sure if what you've seen is real or not. Harry doesn't die, though it seemed he did. And now we're in a new place entirely, with a character who doesn't seem to see the threats in this strange town. There's the feeling that one can never be sure if what they're seeing is real or imaginary, or if that even matters. It's also a connection between Harry and our antagonist. Alessa, too, has been shifting between dreams and nightmares now for years. Now Harry is going to suffer the same pain, trying to escape a cycle of nightmares which seems endless. When he awakens from that first dream, Harry finds himself in the cafe, where we meet our first supporting character, Sybil Bennet. Sybil's a fascinating character. Harry is our single father, our gentle hero, who spends much of the game attempting to talk Alessa down rather than attacking her. Sybil, too, is the reversal of typical roles. She's the more active force, and the one who gives Harry a weapon, and has a more traditionally masculine job. It takes Sybil far longer than Harry to realize the truth about the town. She associates the weirdness with the drug trade, refusing to believe in anything beyond that. Because she is the rational figure, another role usually associated with male characters, just as emotions are often reserved for women. Sybil plays a role a man would usually take, the armed, dangerous guardian who watches out for our lead hero, with her feet planted firmly in reality. It is Harry, our vulnerable, desperate father, who will play the emotional role. He's a frightened, ordinary person in a terrible situation, and it gives him interesting depth, makes him a more relatable person. We can see ourselves in this ordinary man just trying to protect his daughter. There's one major item of interest in the room, the radio. At first, the player can't interact with it, but when they attempt to leave the cafe, it starts making static. Approaching the radio leads to a monster leaping through the window, revealing the radio's power in a shocking way. It can sense the presence of monsters. It's the first, but not the last time technology will serve as a conduit for the otherworldly in this game. While magic exists here, it rarely behaves like sorcery. No one is waving a wand. Instead, this power manipulates the existing structures of reality. Elevators become portals to hell, telephones and televisions carry messages from other worlds, and flipping the switch on a boiler can bring a monster from the abyss to life. The first level of the game requires the player to fumble around the streets of Silent Hill to find 4 keys, which are hidden in very innocuous places. It requires the player to really pay attention to the surroundings, to examine every nook and cranny of the nightmare they're in. The player will come to know this world well, at least until it completely transforms and everything changes again. Earlier, we lost Cheryl and found monstrous children instead. Now, looking for a key, we'll find a doghouse and be attacked by monstrous dogs. The first key unlocks the house, and inside is a map and 3 more locks. The keys of Eclipse. It's a little disturbing that our first key is in a doghouse, and another key happens to be near a dog's head, cut off from the body, beneath a basketball hoop as if someone had just dunked it. It's a disturbing image, and it's where we find the key of woodman. Cutting off heads isn't an impossibility for a woodman. In fact, it's a role the character takes on in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, cutting off the heads of more than 40 wolves. The scarecrow is found in a mailbox across a small abyss, walked over on a plank of wood. The lion key is found in the back of a police car, probably as a point of irony. In the book, the lion is a coward. One of the most prevalent themes of this story is the idea of childhood. Many of the locations explored are heavily connected to it. An elementary school, an amusement park, fairy tales and children's books are referenced throughout, but they are all turned into twisted, nightmarish versions of themselves, a world in which childhood has gone foul. The books mentioned in the game are pivotal in the history of children's fiction. Alice in Wonderland was a book written in a time when children's books were sanctimonious moral tales, meant to instruct them on how to behave. Lewis Carroll's book, in comparison, was lighthearted and meant to be fun, to entertain. When L. Frank Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz 35 years later, he took influence from Alice, making his story light, fun, and entertaining. The girls in these books end up in dangerous situations, but they rarely suffer terribly. They have friends to support them, and the end of their journey is an uplifting, positive event. Like Alice and Dorothy, Alessa has also entered a strange world of magic. But her story will not be lighthearted as those books she read. For one, she journeys through the nightmare alone. The appearance of all these side characters from those worlds may reflect Alessa's desire for help, for someone to be her companion in this quest. Harry uses the supportive cast of the books, characters who helped Dorothy and Alice return home, to find Cheryl, and in the end to help Alessa. A major difference between these works in the game is the fact we see the story through Harry. In the books, Dorothy and Alice are the main characters, and the reader sees them working through their conflicts as the protagonist. Both stories are coming-of-age adventures, of growing into maturity, and the girls are able to mature because they are independent, the protagonists in their own stories. Alessa, however, doesn't have that luxury. The control exerted over her by her mother has made her a prisoner, and her ability to act and make choices has been curtailed. In the end, most of her actions turn out to be useless, and it is through sheer luck that Harry manages to turn things around. When Alessa is first burned by her mother, she's 7, the same age Alice was in Wonderland. For Alice and Dorothy, going away to another world was frightening, but ultimately it was an adventure that the child wanted. Alessa never wanted to go anywhere. She's seen telling Dahlia she just wants to be with her mother. It's Dahlia who forces her to embark on that journey to another world. Once Harry has all 3 Oz keys, he can unlock the door in the house on Leven Street. The eclipse that follows turns the world dark, as the real world is being eclipsed by the other world. The transitions to the other world in this game are heavily tied into Harry's actions. This new world, still growing, grows stronger as the man makes progress. Turning keys, activating the boiler, going to the 4th floor of the hospital. Alessa's dream grows darker the more Harry fights his way through it. Midwich Elementary is not a pleasant place. Even without monsters, this is a place of suffering. The hints are in the bloody garage door with a teacher's name, the dead cat in a locker, the corpse in a bathroom stall, the desk covered in bullying notes. The dark side is also present in its name, taken from the name of the town in Village of the Damned, a movie based upon the novel The Midwich Cuckoos. It's the story of a small town in which all the young women are impregnated by alien creatures, a fate Alessa unfortunately shares. She wasn't the only one who suffered here. There's also the body hanging in the bathroom, with a medical IV in his chest, a likely reference to Alessa's suffering body. The corpse is next to a note, Leonard Rhine, the monster lurks, as well as a shotgun. The writing on the wall is a reference to a Dean Koontz novel, Phantoms. Koontz was heavily influential on the team. One of his books was a finalist for the original concept of their game. And Phantoms is the story of a disappearing town. Everyone has died strangely or violently, with no explanation. The only clue is a message one victim managed to leave on a mirror before he died. Timothy Flight, the Ancient Enemy. It's the name of an author and a book, which is a clue as to the nature of the threat. In a similar vein, The Monster Lurks is a book Harry will find later on that describes how certain abilities can manifest as delusions from people's mental trauma. It gives the player a clue as to how to beat the boss they're soon to face. The necessary weapon is the shotgun, which just so happened to be found in the same bathroom stall as the hint left by the corpse. Another body in this level is found in a locker, which holds a key Harry needs. Nearby is another bloody locker that appears to have been a place someone murdered a cat. The first time the player enters the room, they'll find a locker shaking violently. When opened, it reveals a cat that runs away. After the transformation to the other world, the locker will be still and soaked in blood, only for a different locker to slam open, a human body dropping out when Harry tries to leave. The setup is very similar to a scene from a work the series took inspiration from, the first Alien movie. In the film, the characters are looking for the alien monster in a locker room. One of the lockers begins to shake and they prepare themselves for the monster's appearance, only for the ship's cat to pop out instead. It's a tense moment, made worse for the fact that it sets up a bigger scare, when one of the characters goes looking for the cat and finds the monster instead. In an interesting way, Silent Hill uses the same setup, building a tense moment only to relieve the tension with the cat's appearance, and later rebuild the tension again in the same space by playing with your expectation for what's going to happen. Death is everywhere in this school, where the monsters mostly consist of small, childlike creatures, some of whom are harmless and flee in terror at the sight of you. some of which attack and kill you. The implications are deeply unsettling. The level focuses upon the clock tower. The player must solve a series of puzzles to unlock the door. The pieces of the puzzle are assigned times and must be performed in the right order. They require the player to go to a specific room, often a classroom, and perform a task. In a way, Harry is experiencing a school day at Midwich, following a class schedule. The first task involves retrieving the gold medallion. It is hidden inside the old man's hand in the chemistry lab, referring to the note as the alchemy lab. For centuries, alchemists have tried to find a chemical or agent that could destroy the impurities in certain metals and return them to what they believed was the original material, gold. The puzzle involves finding a chemical, using it to burn away the hand and reveal the gold inside, as if we were alchemists ourselves. The second puzzle in the sequence is in the music room, the Silent Birds puzzle, which involves playing a piece of music with no sound. The important keys are the silent voices, those that can't speak. Once again, the silence that we must listen to. The puzzle is written on sheet music for an actual Japanese song, Don't Trust Anyone Over 30 by the Moonriders. The title is a message that probably felt appropriate to young Alessa, and fits even more for Harry. In the game, nearly every adult we meet is untrustworthy. The lyrics are even more telling. The singer tells a child, Papa isn't coming home, and later that he doesn't understand his father's feelings, or possibly doesn't care to. He discusses the cold weather and winter, clothing your selfishness in gloves. It seems to be a song disillusioned with adulthood. Once the puzzle is complete, the player has both the silver and gold medallions. They are placed in the clock tower, beside plates that read Golden Sun and Silver Moon. The first Otherworld transformation Harry triggered was called an eclipse. Now he has a sun and moon, which opens another door to darkness. A second eclipse occurs here, with two symbols prevalent in alchemical tradition. Both have symbols representing the metals in their names, silver and gold, and the union of the two represents the successful attainment of the alchemist's goal. After this transformation, the school becomes a nightmarish maze. During exploration of this area, the player will come across a room with a table covered in telephones. When Harry tries to leave, the phone rings, and we hear from Cheryl for the first time. Before this point, Cheryl was lost, but possibly safe. We had no real reason to think she was in immediate danger. Now the stakes are even higher. Wherever she is, she's scared and needs help, and the fact that she's calling us from that place is unsettling. Something beyond understanding has Cheryl. There's still one more task to complete. The 5 p.m. task, which is long after most American schools have let out for the day. The task requires going to the boiler room, rather than a classroom like the others. Where the other tasks seem to represent parts of Alessa's school life, this is something else. The boiler room is the location of the final confrontation in the level, the first boss of the series. It is a place of fire. There's a body in the center of the room, burning at the stake. The creature is a giant lizard called Split Head, referenced in the fairy tale found earlier in the level. The set of connections here implies Alessa was afraid of that dark and loud place, associating it with a monster from a book she read. The thin threads of this section of game can be used to portray a much darker picture. The time schedule, as if following a school day, ending in a place no student is supposed to go, where a monster attacks. After the battle, the player receives the K. Gordon key. Did Gordon perhaps take Alessa down there after class? Was the teacher targeted and killed outside their home? There's far too few clues to piece it together, but it seems clear the boiler room is a place that haunts Alessa. The Balkan Church is a location which appears a handful of times in the Silent Hill series, though the only time we can explore it is in the first game, where it sets the stage for meeting with Dahlia. For one cutscene and a short conversation, we stand in the church, obtain the Flauros, and leave. Why is this short scene given its own unique location, which is never seen again? The name of the church connects it to the Balkan region of Europe, which includes the country of Greece. Another appearance referencing the region is the usage of Greek lettering on the incubus demon. The details are scant, but it seems some aspects of the cult were possibly inspired by Greek Christianity. The cross inside the Balkan church is a crucifix, specifically a rude cross, a life-size version of the crucifix, which is a cross on which the body of Christ is still hanging, It emphasizes the death and suffering of Christ, as opposed to empty crosses, which emphasize the miracle of the resurrection. Here we see a holy man being tortured and killed, before we meet Dahlia Gillespie. She stands before the pulpit at the heart of the church, as if she were about to give us a sermon. Dahlia is the instigator behind nearly all the events of the Silent Hill series. Like most antagonists, she doesn't see herself as villainous. It could be argued she believes she is doing what's best. She says as much to her daughter before burning her child alive. 2 of the fully animated scenes with her show her in holy places, the Balkan church, and an unknown temple in the intro, which gives the impression of being a Greek temple to some Olympian god. Another possible sign of Greek influence. Dahlia speaks in ominous riddles and uses occult language. First, she tells Harry he is walking the hermit's path, a reference to the tarot card representing wisdom and knowledge. The figure on the card carries the light of truth and the shield of Solomon, and stands upon a distant mountain, holding a light to guide others. In the game, Dahlia uses Harry to lead Alessa to where she wants her. Harry, unknowingly, is Alessa's guiding light, leading her to Dahlia's trap. She also references gyromancy, a form of divination that uses dizziness to connect to the divine. The diviner creates a circle with letters along the outside, and spins inside the circle. Once dizziness causes them to stumble, the letters they step on form words. The divining ends when the letters spell out coherent words, or when the fortune teller faints. This is probably one reason why Dahlia is seen barefoot. Mystic characters are often seen without shoes as a way to associate them with the wilderness, as they are closer to nature. Dahlia wears long flowing robes with many layers and a shawl over her hair. She wears a tie, no shoes, and a dress. And the combination of elements in her deranged way of speaking makes her come across as unstable. It's a way of setting Harry at ease. Why should he be suspicious of the harmless, mad old lady? According to that lady, the real threat in town is Alessa, and the mark of Samael she's spreading across town. In Jewish folklore, Samael was the name of the angel of death. The name likely means poison of God or blind one. A cult tradition would use the name to refer to the angelic form of Satan before he fell from grace. Dahlia's use of the name has a certain connotation, that the mark is evil, associated with death and destruction. It's a very manipulative choice on her part, but we won't know that for quite a while. She also gives Harry the Flauros, a triangular device named for one of the demon lords of hell, mentioned in the Ars Goetia. He is a demon gifted with the power of seeing the past, present, and future. If sufficiently trapped, he will answer your questions truthfully, but only if he is caught in a triangle prison. The second level of the game is set in Alchemilla Hospital. As soon as Harry enters, there's a gunshot. In the following scene, we meet the only other male character in the game, Michael Kaufman. When Harry enters the room, Kaufman almost shoots him. While he eventually calms down, this first interaction is telling. Kaufman is dangerous, and he doesn't mean us well. If the player doesn't continue the side quest after the hospital, this is the first and only time Kaufman is seen. He is a dangerous figure, attempting to make a break for it. Yet without him, the best ending of the game is unattainable. He makes a comment about how it's snowing outside. For the most part, the atmosphere of Silent Hill is seen and described as fog and mist. This is the only time anyone describes it as snow. The snow aspect will vanish from later games until its return in Shattered Memories. The way the characters respond to the weather seems to imply it's very out of season. It is a point of weirdness, in the same way the fog and the vanished streets are. Kaufman's scene is short and to the point. If you've played the game before, you'll know he's lying in his explanations to Harry. Harry explains his reasons for being here, and we learn his wife has been dead for years. Kaufman shows little concern. He picks up his briefcase and leaves, clearly not interested in working with Harry to survive. He's only interested in protecting himself and his interests, and doesn't show any concern for Harry or his daughter. Alchemilla is the name for a type of flower that includes about 300 species, more commonly known as lady's mantle. The most common type, alchemilla vulgaris, is often referred to as woman's herb because of its myriad uses. Made into an herbal tea, it's said to treat menopausal symptoms, menstruation pains, and other gynecological issues. Given what's happened to alessa, it's quite upsetting to think the hospital was named for a flower associated with feminine health. The hospital seems normal at first. Early exploration reveals 2 maps. One for the hospital, one for the basement, and a nearby basement key. Early on, we're seeing heavy focus on the hospital's basement, perhaps hinting there's something to be found down there. The most important thing to be found in this section is, strangely enough, an innocuous plastic bottle. If the player has the bottle, they can use it to obtain some of the red liquid on the floor of Kaufman's office. Taking this liquid is the difference between Sybil's death or survival. Otherwise, there isn't much to find yet. Eventually, Harry finds the generator room, where he must turn on the generator to reactivate the elevator. This leads to the transformation to the otherworld, just as turning on the boiler in Midwich led to the same. There's a definite association between the technology of the town and the activation of the otherworld. There are 3 main floors and the basement, but going to these levels leads to dead ends. Only once Harry has tried them all will a new button appear for the mysterious 4th floor. In Japanese, the word for the number 4 sounds very similar to the word for death. 4 is a bad luck number, making this especially ominous. Harry has no choice but to go to the 4th floor, however. It's a long hall that leads back to the main hospital, and after Harry's traveled through it, the 4th floor will disappear, and the hospital will have transformed. Nearly all the monsters in this level are parasitic. Doctors and nurses, appearing very human, become monstrous enemies because of the growths on their backs. Unlike the other creatures we see, these enemies are definitely people, taken by something monstrous and transformed. It implies the possibility that all the monsters were human once. It also appears to be a terrible kind of punishment for the people Alessa may have considered complicit in her suffering. There's also the bloodsuckers, a trio of tentacle-like beasts that flail madly, feasting on blood. They appear solely in the hospital levels, implying an association between the medical profession and blood-sucking. The implication of these people as parasites and suckers that feed on people says a lot about how Alessa feels about them. These doctors and nurses are leeches feeding off her pain. They are parasites using her body. Even if many of them may not know about the secret basement, they have all become guilty by association. The main puzzle in the hospital is the colored plates puzzle. Harry must find 4 plates named for 4 characters from Alice in Wonderland: the cat, Queen, Turtle, and Hatter. There are 8 slots in the door, 4 of which are already filled, and a note on the wall lists various things. Clouds flowing over a hill, sky on a sunny day, tangerines that are bitter, lucky 4-leaf clover, violets in the garden, dandelions along a path, unavoidable sleeping time, liquid flowing from a slashed wrist. The list corresponds to the colors on the plates and shows the order they must be placed into the door. It starts with lovely poetic descriptions, but by the end, we've changed to something much darker. Unavoidable sleeping time is black, like the back of your eyelids, like sleep or death. The last is red for blood, but not just any bloodshed. The imagery here is heavily associated with suicide. Clearly, Alessa's thoughts are heavily focused upon death, specifically her own. Harry makes it back to the basement, where he must push a shelf out of the way to reveal a secret door, and find the path to the level below. To get there, he must get rid of the vines covering the grate over the stairwell. These growths seem to imply it's been a long time since anyone went down there. Using the lighter and disinfecting alcohol he found elsewhere, Harry burns the vines off. Walking in, he will comment that it looks like someone's been here, which goes against the idea no one's been down here for a while. Is this because no physical person has been here? Is it possibly Alessa's spirit, Harry senses? There's a picture of the young girl by the bed, and this is where Harry will first learn her name, Alessa Gillespie. Alessa's is a story of nightmarish abuse, but it is also a tale of transformation. Through the magic ritual, Alessa becomes the Mother of God. She creates Cheryl and the Otherworld, and the dark versions of Silent Hill to stop her mother. In the Book of Lost Memories, Alessa is referred to as the Empress, the name of the third tarot in the major arcana. The Empress is a symbol of female power and fertility, not just in the sense of pregnancy, but the general sense of creation. It's very fitting given her role. The Mother of God, creator of the otherworld, the most powerful magic figure in Silent Hill. Shortly after finding this mysterious room in the basement and learning Alessa's name, Harry meets another tragic figure. Her close association with this hidden basement room is our first clue to who she is and why she's here, though she will remain the most unique, inexplicable figure of Silent Hill. When Harry meets Lisa Garland, she's seemingly untouched by the monsters roaming nearby. She's terrified, but she's been kept safe in the locked room, which Harry can only access by finding the key in the basement. It almost appears as if Harry was guided towards Lisa, though not by Dahlia, as it wouldn't suit her purposes. If anyone brought the two together, I would imagine it was Alessa. Ultimately, the meeting between Harry and Lisa leads to two things. Harry eventually realizes the truth of the town, and Lisa eventually remembers the truth of herself. Lisa is a nurse, but her outfit isn't exactly traditional. She wears a short white skirt and top, a red jacket, and red heels. Her jacket may be a reference to the film The Exorcist III, specifically a scene where a nurse is seen wearing a baggy red sweater. This first scene with her is quite mysterious. She knows nothing about the situation in town. She says she doesn't know about the basement, which repeat players will know is not true. It seems the traumatic events of the game have led Lisa to block her own memories to survive. Eventually, she'll remember so much it destroys her. As soon as Harry attempts to talk to Lisa about what he's seen, he begins to suffer a headache. The transition from the other world back to the normal world seems to be the cause. Harry is one of only two characters who are shown reacting to the change in this way. Why does Harry suffer pain? Is he more closely connected to the power of the town than it appears? Is he feeling Alessa's suffering? The green lion is a reference to an alchemical process and the image that represents it. The sun was the symbol of gold. It represented the ultimate goal of many alchemists, the creation of that golden metal. A green lion was vitriol, also known as mercury, an invaluable substance in alchemy because it could destroy all metals except for gold. The grand goal of every alchemist worth their salt was to transform lesser metals into gold. On the antique store sign and the antique key, there is the same image of the green lion eating the sun that appeared in countless alchemy texts. It's the perfect name for Dahlia's store. Her faith believes this world must be transformed into paradise. Transforming the world is the green lion, an acid that destroys everything, leaving only gold behind. When Harry arrives, the store is abandoned. He finds a secret room and decides to investigate. Inside, he finds the second church in town. When he tries to leave, the table catches fire, and next we know, Harry has been teleported away back into the other world. He awakens in the room with Lisa as if he never left. Since Harry entered Silent Hill, he has fallen asleep and woken up elsewhere multiple times. Here it happens in quick sequence, back to back. Harry awakens in the hospital, sitting on a bed across from Lisa. She says he fell asleep and has been here the whole time having a bad dream. Knowing what we know about Lisa, that she isn't alive, gives us a hint as to what's real and what's not in these scenes. Harry finds her in the other world of the hospital, and when the siren sounds and the normal world returns, she's gone. Later, when the fire starts in the antique store and the other world returns, once again Harry finds himself with Lisa. She only appears in the other world in these dream-like sequences. It might mean Harry is dreaming of her, or perhaps speaking to her ghost in his mind. It might mean only his soul is there rather than his body. But it appears that Lisa is a spirit, a memory rather than a real person, which makes scenes with her suspect. Lisa tells him about the cult in town, the history of black magic and Silent Hill, and how Dahlia lost her daughter in a fire years ago. Before Harry can hear anything else, He fades out again and is back in the storeroom. The scene is haunting. Harry is in the dark, in a rusted, horrific room, thinking to himself in the silence, was that another dream? He wonders if maybe he's already dead and none of this is real. A fate that comes true in the worst ending. It's one of the most powerful scenes, and is perfectly silent, meaning conveyed through subtitles and Harry's slow movements through this dark space. Outside, the world transforms once again. Each time, the change is more drastic. The empty abyss beneath a metal-grated floor from the hospital is now present throughout town, and the fog has been replaced with an endless darkness. Harry is trapped and forced to go forward through the town center. Inside, there's an escalator and a display of TVs, which spring to life when Harry approaches. We hear Cheryl's voice from far off, begging for her father, and her screaming visage appears on screen. She's struggling, trapped and in pain, and the televisions flash with white and red colors, images of Cheryl writhing, and Alessa's photograph, and strange symbols. The symbols are the 7 seals of the Olympian spirits, figures of magic that are first mentioned in Renaissance-era tomes like the Arbitel of Magic, named Eratron, Bethor, Phaleg, Olk, Haggith, Ophiel, and Fool. In Nowhere, these spirit seals will be carved into doors with their names on them, and matching keys will have to be found to unlock them. These spirits were magic beings called upon by magicians for aid in their work. Each had their own specialties, powers, and domains. Strangely enough, though not all 7 spirits appear in Nowhere, their symbols do appear in the mall on the televisions. The seals that flash on the screen are all white, save one, which appears bright red. Ox, who isn't in Nowhere. He is a spirit of the sun, who rules over wisdom and medicine. As Harry continues to explore the mall, he'll be attacked by the game's second boss, a worm creature called the Twin Feeler. Alessa is heavily associated with insects, specifically moths and butterflies. They are creatures of transformation, but they are also fragile, short-lived things. The Twin Feeler itself will appear again after having undergone a transformation. Harry returns to Lisa in the hospital, hoping she knows of a way to get to the lake. Luckily she does, the waterworks. But she begs Harry not to go, afraid of being alone, yet rejects the idea of leaving with Harry when he offers, feeling as if she's somehow not supposed to leave. She mentions feeling cold as well, a temperature associated with death. Before Harry can make it to the waterworks, the Twin Feeler returns, having transformed into the moth float stinger. Moths and butterflies are heavily associated with death, and countless numbers of them line the walls of Alessa's room. They are symbols heavily associated with the girl, who herself is in the midst of a deadly transformation. The death of the float stinger transitions the world back into the fog world, but it's not long before Harry stumbles and watches as the road beneath him changes, and the other world is back. He comments this time that it feels different, as if reality is becoming a nightmare. The difference is that instead of changing between 2 worlds, 2 are becoming one, as the darkness becomes more powerful. Eventually, exploration brings Harry to the docks and the boathouse. Here, he's reunited not only with Sybil, but with Dahlia as well, who appears to offer more cryptic advice. Sybil is concerned. For the first time, she's beginning to doubt there are rational explanations for what's happening. In response, Harry says one of the most lovely lines of dialogue in the game.
It's not me. This whole town. It's being invaded by the other world. By a world of someone's nightmarish delusions come to life. Little by little, the invasion is spreading, trying to swallow up everything in darkness.
Here we have put into words what's happening in Silent Hill. Even after his explanation, however, Sybil doesn't understand. Harry is adaptive. He can see that something unusual is happening and is stretching his worldview to fit these new experiences. Sybil can't do that. She denies supernatural aspects from the start and continues to do so at this point. It is these same exact powers that will infect her with a parasite and turn her into an enemy. No scene in the game better reinforces the ideas at the core of Silent Hill's imagery than this one. It's a story about silence and absence, about the things that go unnoticed. Alessa is the real victim. We see her and learn about her, but we don't speak to her. It's Dahlia talking to us, and her words convince us of horrible, untrue things. Words lie. Silence reveals the truth, by allowing the player to see for themselves what's real. After the meeting, Harry heads further out into the lake, crossing the docks toward the lighthouse. Inside, there's a lovely camera angle. As Harry runs up the stairs, the camera floats above him, rising as he rises. In the center is an ominous darkness that doesn't move the same way the stairs do, giving an illusory effect of Harry being chased by shadows. The lighthouse itself is a powerful symbol. Alessa is there for just a moment. This was truly a detour, a distraction that Dahlia sets up to separate him from Sybil. Lighthouses are symbols of guidance, the light in the storm, but this one has served as a distraction, a light leading us away into danger. When he returns to the boathouse, Harry is concerned about the fact Sybil hasn't returned and decides to set off after her. But before we head off to save her, we need to make a detour to save someone else. To start the Kaufman side quest, the player must make their way to the resort area, to Annie's bar. Harry finds Kaufman on the ground being attacked and saves his life. Presumably, if the side quest is ignored, this is where Kaufman dies. While it's certainly a fate he deserves, without him, Cheryl can't be saved. Before leaving, Kaufman makes a point to pick up his briefcase, just as he did in the hospital. He cares more about objects, about his possessions, than he does the lives of others. According to the novelization, the briefcase contains passports, money, and other things Kaufman would need to leave the country, which was apparently his plan after he learned about Dahlia's true goals. Luckily for Harry, Kaufman left behind a present, his wallet. It leads him down a line of clues that ends in the location of another bottle of red liquid. But once Harry finds it, Kaufman shows up again. He immediately shouts, "Give me that," and snatches the bottle. His behavior is rude and defensive, telling Harry he'd better stop snooping if he doesn't want to die, that he should find a way out of town instead. Once again, he shows how little he cares about other people, not once considering letting Harry know what's going on, or giving him a hint as to what the liquid is. At every turn, he chooses to keep Harry in the dark, even when sharing information would do nothing to hurt Kaufman, and could help save Harry or Sybil's life. Remember, it's the red liquid that saves Sybil, and it's apparently luck that makes Harry decide to use it on her, since Kaufman never told him what it was or what it could do. Amusement parks are associated with childhood, a place dedicated to entertainment and aimed at kids, heavily associated with innocence and youth. But this park is twisted and ruined. Alessa's struggle against her mother will come to a head here, in a place where parents and children are meant to have fun and enjoy themselves. What is joyous for most children is hell for Alessa Gillespie. When Harry comes to the merry-go-round, it's clear something's wrong. Sybil Bennett is no longer the woman we know. She's slumped in a wheelchair, unresponsive, before she begins to move in a strange, unearthly manner. The scene is colored with a red tint, the same as her eyes. She stands and approaches with a dead expression and inhuman movements, and the battle has begun. This scene is a lovingly crafted example of the use of silence in the game. Nothing is said. The music is an ominous tone playing endlessly in the background. Most of what we hear is noise, the squeak of the wheelchair as she stands, her footsteps. The location of the fight is perfect, a symbol of innocence and childhood turned dark, but also a perfect circle, a symbol of eternity. And with the darkness surrounding it outside, there's something ethereal and liminal about the location. You can save Sybil, of course, if you have the red liquid. Yet saving her is horrific too. She stumbles, clutching at her face and throat, and falls to the ground. The scene shows a leech crawling out of her and Sybil's back covered in blood. The moment is tense. Thankfully, she does rise again, unsure of what happened, with seemingly no memory of the fight. As Harry cares for her wounds, a lovely, haunting scene starts to play. We don't see Harry or Sybil in this scene. We see shadows, and in the center, the red silhouetted horses of the carousel spinning endlessly, the symbol of life and death, the cycle of eternity. "Why did they take your daughter?" Sybil asks. Here, Harry admits the truth. They aren't biologically related, and he found Cheryl, and no one knew where she came from. He discusses his wife's illness and death, how they took Cheryl in, the possibility of a connection between her and the town, but he continues to insist Cheryl is his daughter and he'll save her, no matter what. These important facts are revealed without showing us the speaker. We're allowed to imagine how they look as they're sharing this intimate moment. Meanwhile, the cycle of life, the spinning carousel goes on. These little concerns are nothing in the greater scheme of things, but to Harry they are everything. He'll risk it all for his daughter, who may not be his blood, but is still family. His strength of character and will is emphasized by the juxtaposition with this symbol of eternity, that against these huge odds and forces greater than him, Harry will still fight for Cheryl. The moment the scene with Sybil closes, a new one begins. We see Harry enter another area of the park, as dark and rusted as before. He comes to a stop across from Alessa, who seems uninterested in him. He tells her he doesn't care what she's doing, all he wants is his daughter. Alessa doesn't speak. Once again, the music is a low hum in the background, and the focus is on the few lines of dialogue that occur. Harry is begging for his daughter's life. Near the climax of the game, the ultimate action of our male hero isn't to rush in guns blazing. He uses words to try and bring things to a peaceful conclusion. He isn't even wielding a weapon in this scene, and he doesn't draw his weapon after he's attacked. Alessa uses her powers to push him away, not to hurt or kill him, but to knock him back. Alessa's had plenty of chances to remove Harry permanently, and in fact it would have been better for her and Silent Hill if she had. But there's something innately good in Alessa, despite all her suffering, that must recognize the decency in Harry, and she's reluctant to hurt him. Harry stands and realizes the Flauros Dahlia gave him is reacting to Alessa. He doesn't activate it on purpose. Alessa allowed Harry to live, to get close to her, because he is an innocent person, but he's a Trojan horse, carrying the instrument of her defeat without him even realizing it. This is the turning point for the narrative. It rewrites the story. Everything we've seen in retrospect takes on new meaning. Nothing is like what we've been told. Alessa isn't the enemy, and Dahlia isn't our friend. She's played us from the start, playing upon Harry's parental instincts, acting the crazy old fool so no one sees her as a threat. Dahlia doesn't acknowledge Harry, though he speaks to her. His role in her plan has ended. She only has eyes for Alessa, quite literally talking down to her as she towers over the injured child. There's still so much love when Alessa replies to her, with her first real line of the game, "Mama." That short sentence changes everything, for the player and Harry. He starts to put things together, but it's too late. Dahlia is a horrifying villain, standing at the cusp of victory, oversharing her plan like your typical cartoon bad guy. But it's an awful moment. It twists the knife for the player, and Harry. Dahlia mentions that she couldn't have done this without someone's assistance, and that Alessa is indebted to this man for his help. Alessa tells her mother, "No, get away from me," but it's too late. Dahlia takes Alessa. A flash of magical light fills the screen, and we're transported to another world. Nowhere is heavily based upon Alchemilla Hospital and has a similar layout, with most of the same rooms, but some things have changed. The doors in this area are all locked and have the symbols of the Olympian spirits carved into them. The Book of Lost Memories says these areas represent Alessa's mind, sealed off, and unlocking them is the only way forward. In the Ophiel hallway, we have our first puzzle, the Grim Reaper's List. There's a locked door with a strange keypad near it listing the alphabet. On another wall is a list of names and numbers. The numbers are their ages, and when the names are reordered from oldest to youngest, their first initials spell a word, alert. The list is meant to refer to the Reaper taking lives, with the old dying first, as is most common, but not a universal rule. It's yet another riddle centered upon death. It's clear now more than ever that we are in Alessa's mind, and the young girl thinks of little else. Unlocking the door leads to the morgue, a place where these dead would have been prepared for their final rest. Here, Harry finds the first of many occult objects he'll need to move forward. But when Harry tries to leave the morgue, he'll see he's no longer alone. Lisa is back, standing in a corner, acting strangely. She begins to explain, but her explanation leaves so much unknown. She's the same as them, just hadn't noticed it before. She begs Harry to stand by her and save me from them. approaching him with her arms wide. Lisa is a sexual being, and that's clear from her first meeting with Harry. Her outfit is far more revealing than most nursing uniforms. Her behavior is sexual. She runs into Harry's arms when they first meet, latching onto the only other human she's seen. From that moment, her behavior and language with him is pointed, trying to influence Harry into desiring her so he'll stay with her. This comes to a head in the scene outside the morgue. The stress of the day and the woman's terrifying behavior have gotten to Harry because he pushes her away. What might have happened if he'd been accepting, we'll never know. But the heartbreak at being turned away from him seems to break her. Whatever she was holding back, whatever truth it was she was ignoring, can no longer be ignored. Lisa begins to bleed. The blood comes from everywhere and nowhere. She has no open wounds. She is the wound, bleeding endlessly until all her clothes are red. Still she tries to hold Harry, who runs in terror and bars the door behind him, as Lisa tries desperately to follow. Harry is her one link to her humanity, her connection to reality, and she wants nothing more than to possess him. If Lisa had grabbed him, or if Harry had been accepting of her embrace, it's possible he'd never have been allowed to leave. After her death, a diary appears in the area. It reveals more details of her suffering. The way the diary is written and how it ends seems to imply Lisa's fate, that she likely died in that locked room. Harry first meets Lisa by entering the sick room, finding a key and unlocking a door. He essentially sets her free. Whether Lisa is a ghost, a memory, or a fragment of some kind, I think it's clear she was trapped here, her suffering and pain leading her to repress her horrible memories. But the longer she existed, the more she began to remember, until it destroyed her. She says she's the same as them, but she clearly isn't. The transformation that overtakes her is nothing like the other monsters in the game, let alone the nurses. I think her transformation is self-afflicted. The memories and pains of her life that she's repressed forcibly revealing themselves in a visual way. Another possible hint that she's not a living person, but a spiritual entity. The symbols Harry must find in Nowhere all have ties to religion and mysticism. There's 5 of them hidden throughout Nowhere, each one required to open the final door. The symbol found in the morgue is called the Amulet of Solomon, more famously known as the Star of David. It's become a symbol of Judaism, but may be far older than the faith, as it's also heavily used in alchemy. Its origin, as far as we know, is the biblical figure of Solomon, who is both an important figure in the Abrahamic faiths and known as a powerful magician. The next symbol is the crest of Mercury found in the jewelry store. Mercury is the Roman god of travelers, but the sign in the game isn't Mercury's symbol. The symbol looks like the Asclepius, named for the god whose symbol it was. Asclepius was a god of medicine and healing, whose symbol is a snake wrapped around a stick or staff. Snakes represent healing because they can shed their skin and start fresh, representing the removal of impurities. The symbol is like the caduceus, Mercury's symbol, but the difference is that caduceus has 2 snakes and often a pair of wings. The Silent Hill symbol has pieces of both. It has wings but only 1 snake. The combination is likely because the symbols have been confused for one another for years. In the kitchen, the player finds the dagger of Melchior. The name of the dagger is another biblical reference. Tradition says Melchior was the name of one of the Magi, the 3 wise men who came to Jesus' birth. As a magus, he would have been a wise, powerful magical figure. This item, the dagger, isn't something that exists in any legends connected to Melchior. Unlike the other items, this seems to be entirely fictional. The next is the Disc of Ouroboros found in Alessa's sick room. Terrible cutscene plays when Harry enters, Dahlia explaining her plan to use her daughter's suffering. The symbol found in the room is the Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, a symbol of reincarnation and immortality. Ouroboros means self-devourer. In alchemy, it's a symbol of purity, wholeness, and infinity. The placement of it here, given the events that have occurred in the room, is telling. It can relate to the god gestating in Alessa. It could refer to Alessa, reborn in Cheryl. The symbol found so close to her bed is the one that reflects her role in the game. The last item is the Ankh, found in the graffiti room. The Ankh is an ancient Egyptian symbol associated with royalty and magic. It was possibly representative of the sun rising over the horizon. As such, it was often gold and was considered to be a key to the afterlife. When worn round the neck, it was protective. Otherwise, it was heavily associated with traveling to the afterlife, opening the door between life and death. These are symbols Alessa may have known because of her mother's faith and magical practices, or she may have read about them herself, studying magic to understand her own powers. Ultimately, the way to the end of the game is barred by a magic door, and to open the door, Harry must have all 5, all of which are hidden in parts of Alessa's memories. It requires him to see pieces of her past to understand what has brought them to this moment. It's Alessa's last attempt to make Harry understand what's happened and her own intentions. The end of the game varies greatly, depending on who has survived to this point. Should Sybil be alive, the scene will begin with the officer aiming her gun at Dahlia, who explains her plan has come to fruition thanks to Harry. Sybil attempts to shoot her, and a barrier protects the woman. That is when Harry arrives. This confrontation is once again not a physically violent one. Harry doesn't draw a weapon or threaten Dahlia in any way. Like his confrontation with Alessa, Harry approaches the situation with an outlook of trying to understand, and he isn't the one to kill Dahlia. If the player helped Kaufman, this is when he'll appear, determining the final boss the player will face. Without him, Alessa begins to glow, turning into an almost religious figure, wearing a long white gown, a halo of light framing her face. She becomes the incubator. An incubator is by definition a device meant to create the ideal environment to gestate a child. If Kaufman appears, he'll shoot Dahlia. He's the second person to try and harm her. The only person here who never raises a hand against the bad guy is Harry. Then Kaufman throws the red liquid at Alessa. It shatters and she shrieks in pain. As she does, the holy glow fades and the white dress becomes stained red, as if the girl is bleeding, pulling on some major Carrie vibes. At the same time, something horrific rises from her back. The pain, the screaming, the red blood pouring down, her body tearing asunder. Alessa is giving birth to the incubus. An incubus is an ancient mythic creature from Mesopotamia. The name in Latin means to lie on, just as the succubus, the female counterpart, means to lie under. The incubus comes into the dreams of women and sexually assaults them, sometimes impregnating them, even riding them to exhaustion and death. It was believed to be a real threat in medieval Europe, where the creature was especially fond of hunting holy women. The choice of name for this creature says a lot about its role in the game. Alessa has physically been asleep this whole time, trapped in a nightmare of pain. Dark magic impregnated her, and during the sleep, she's been gestating this creature, quite like the myths of what the incubus does. While the name comes from Akkadian myth, the design is a newer concept. It's the Sabbatic goat, also known as Baphomet. The first mention of the name comes from the Middle Ages, in a legal transcript from 1307, involving charges of devil worship against the Templar order. The name was then taken into mystic and occult practices over the years, written about in manuscripts and later given a face by the artist Eliphas Levi in 1856. The concept was meant to represent the duality and completeness of the universe, the sun and moon, male and female. The words are the Latin solve and coagula, which means separate and join together. The Baphomet in Silent Hill has writing on it too, the same 2 words reflected across its body. Masahiro Ito says he believes the writing is Greek. I received an email after I posted my original video about the incubus from a fan who said they were a classicist philologist, someone who studies classic literary texts, and they had come up with a translation for the letters. The writer explained that the letters were reversed, so the words need to be read from the back of incubus rather than the front. They then explained the second letter seemed to be the letter alpha written in the upright position. This would make it this word, the feminine gender case for the adjective unhappy, a fitting word. And many thanks to AB for the explanation. Whichever boss Harry fights, the conclusion of the battle is the same. The world begins to shake, fire erupts under the grates below us, and falls from the sky above us. Beneath Alessa, the symbol of Metatron becomes clear. In the bad endings, Alessa falls to her knees, cradling herself. We hear Cheryl's voice call out,
"Thank you, Daddy. Goodbye."
In the good endings, there is no farewell. Cheryl is simply gone. There is a new infant in Harry's arms, but our hero has failed his quest. The ending comes swiftly. It happens so fast it's almost a blink of an eye. For a lot of players finishing the game for the first time, it was far too short, because many had not caught on to the extra side quests and steps needed for better endings, leading Harry to a tragic end. But even in good endings, there's still a lot left unexplained. This is a game that leaves much to the imagination and a great deal of questions unanswered. It must be this way. A game about silence can't start telling everyone everything at the end. The ending cinematics have no dialogue whatsoever. Like the rest of the story, the importance is in the silence. It is a tragedy no matter what ending you get, because Harry fails his quest. In the Good Plus ending, he receives an infant, but it's not his child. Alessa is set free, but she still dies. Both she and Cheryl are gone, 2 innocent girls sacrificed by selfish people. How terrifying it must be for him to not only lose his daughter, but to be handed a new baby, whose origins are unknown. This isn't like finding Cheryl on the side of the road. This time Harry knows he's being handed a baby with supernatural roots, and he still takes her in. It is this kindness that makes Harry such a fantastic character. He risks so much to save Cheryl and tries to help Alessa even when he thinks the girl took his daughter. He doesn't raise his weapon against humans, even those who hurt him betray him. He tries to help everyone he meets and believes the best of them. This is his greatest strength and his weakness. This trust he has is taken advantage of by Dahlia, leading to Alessa's end. But it is also this trust that leads Harry to protect Kaufman, despite his suspicious behavior. In the end, Kaufman comes to his rescue. Harry's trust in people is a double-edged sword. Silent Hill is a story of love and hate, but the lines between the two aren't always clear. Alessa is fighting Dahlia, but still refers to the woman as Mama. Dahlia uses Alessa against her will and talks about her daughter as if she's a thing rather than a person. And yet Alessa's sick room has a chair and a picture of the girl sitting on a table, as if someone sat vigil beside her. In a twisted way, Dahlia still loves her daughter. Nothing is simple in Silent Hill. Harry stops the god, but Cheryl is still gone. The last we see of the little girl is early in the game, when she vanishes into the fog. The little girl we came to save is lost. What then does Harry, or the player, accomplish in the game? He fails to save Cheryl, Alessa, Lisa, and Sybil is only saved in some endings. He doesn't exactly punish the evildoers either, as he's not the one who kills Kaufman or Dahlia. In some ways, Harry makes things worse, falling for Dahlia's lies. If he hadn't intervened, the seal of Metatron may have worked, and Dahlia may have been stopped without outside interference. Most games are designed to entertain, to give players a sense of power and control, and the joy of accomplishment when they succeed. Silent Hill is an entirely different scenario. Even when you get the best ending, you don't succeed. The story doesn't explain much to you. What happened to the town? What happened to Lisa? What will happen now? It's all left unknown. What sense of accomplishment is there to have? This is a game that leaves you bereft and ends with a feeling of loss, because you didn't accomplish much in comparison to all that was lost. But that's the point of the story and its themes. It focuses upon silence and absence and death. It's a story of grief, of a widowed father who's lost his daughter, the story of a nurse abused and killed who finally finds vengeance, the story of a daughter suffering for years who finally escapes the pain. The best ending of the game, the ones that guarantee Harry's survival, are those in which he goes out of his way to save other people. He helps when they ask him to, and even when they don't. The story punishes the selfish, the wicked, the unkind, with explicitly hellish, violent imagery. Dahlia is burned alive like her daughter. Kaufman is dragged into the fires below by the woman he used and likely killed. The good and the evil suffer, but the good manage to eke out some semblance of peace through their selflessness and kindness and the way they help others. The selfish are not so lucky. It is not a happy ending, but it is an important one. Though much changes from game to game, this legacy of rewarding kindness and punishing selfishness exists in every Silent Hill title. It's integral to the spirit of the series. that terrible things will happen, that there are powers and forces far beyond us and out of our control, but we as human beings can still make a difference. Maybe we can't save everyone. Maybe we can't right all the wrongs of the world, but we can still choose to be kind.